What is good, team? Welcome back to the channel. After a few days off training, we are back in the swing of things. So we had a 4-day diet break deload last week, which was nice. And I've discussed, I guess, over the last few videos, a lot around deload diet breaks, the benefits of using those. And I've had lots of conversations this week about deloads. Just kind of happens that a lot of clients were deloading over the next couple of weeks as well. So to kind of reiterate, the point of the deload specifically is really just around like dissipation of fatigue. So I think there's been a lot of misconceptions about deloading on social media, where like people just kind of tout the fact that you don't need to deload ever, you can just train forever. Where I'd push back on that and say, if you are training really, really hard, you will accumulate lots and lots of fatigue the longer you progress and the longer you train hard. So there will be a point at which you need to kind of pull the brakes, so to speak, and have a diet break slash deload. You know, the two can be used interchangeably, especially during fat phases, but it would be a simple case of just like reductions in training volume, reductions in training intensity. You might have a light week of training, you might have a, just some time out of the gym, which is my preferred method. And I think a lot of it comes down to like personal psychology. I'm someone who, I'm pretty all or nothing. So if I go to the gym, I go to the gym to train. I don't like going to the gym to just train light. So rather than like extending out that deload, I'd rather just have a few days out of the gym, short, sharp, fast, get in, get out, and then start back again hard training. So a point to bring up sort of post deload, and this kind of goes for anyone starting out a new training block, or even just coming back from injury, coming back from a deload, is starting a little bit lighter. So it would just be a case of simply starting out maybe 3 reps in reserve, a little bit further away from failure, maybe using loads that were a little bit lighter than you had previously used in the last phase, for example, just to kind of get accustomed to maybe some new movements, to reacquaint yourself with some exercises, and to just kind of give the tissues, tendons, ligaments, joints a bit of an opportunity to catch up, so you're not sort of getting injured off the back of a deload. And I think this reigns true for anyone starting a new program, is you always just want to start out a little bit lighter as well, a little bit easier, so that you have a bigger runway for progression. Because if you kind of go gung-ho week 1, we do run the risk of injury, number 1, but number 2, we do limit our ability to progress in the long term, because if you kind of get everything done in week 1 or 2, you've kind of got no room to move from there. So always start out a little bit lighter, a little bit easier. But with that being said, we're kicking off new training block this week. So this will be the last training block before we move into our, I guess, show. This will be the last sort of show block, which in terms of like overall training setup, a little bit of changes here with structure. So the plan is this week to run you guys through all those sessions, some new exercises, some new training sessions, which is exciting. I think it's always nice to kind of vary your training stimulus to some degree. And again, I got this question quite a lot this week around how often you should change programs. Anywhere from like 8 to 16 weeks, I think, is perfectly adequate. So again, you want long enough that you can kind of adapt to a program, that you're not super sore, and that you can continually progress, because I think changing too frequently, you'll get way too sore and you won't progress. Where if we spend too long doing the same stuff, we do run the risk of getting overuse injuries, staleness, things stop progressing. So we want that sweet spot. I think for most people, 8 to 16 weeks is nice for a training block, and then it's just time to change exercises, rotate movements out, potentially change your training split as well. So this one, gonna be an awesome day. It's a full upper body session, but basically consisting of a lot of back to start, some chest, some delts, and then tomorrow in for lower body. So it's gonna be a great week of training. But we'll kick this one off, seated row. Actually did this in my last program, so again, I've been progressing on this every week. So we keep it in rotation, 2 sets, 8 to 12 reps, seated, neutral grip cable row. So seated rows done, 2 working sets, 8 to 12 reps there, and we move on to our incline lever row. Probably one of my favorite sort of upper back thickness movements that I'll use in my training, especially moving into this last phase of this contest prep. We had previously been doing bent over rows. We now opted for a more stable movement, and I think this is a really, really strategic but also smart way to adjust your training. During off-season, during contest prep, not many things need to change, other than the fact you would potentially need to sub out more free weight movements for more stable machine-based movements. So when you get smaller, when you get leaner, fatigue does accumulate, the risk of injury does increase, but also your leverages change. So a normal bent over barbell row might feel fine most of the time when I'm big and heavy and strong. As I get smaller and leaner, it does become a little more difficult to maybe maintain some bracing, or it might just put a little bit more pressure on the lower back and things like that. So just for added safety, for maximum output, I have opted for a more chest supported movement, which I think is a really strategic way to kind of go about your comp prep programming. But moving on to this, one thing that I did want to highlight, especially moving into like the first week of this training block, and I guess for anyone out there who's starting a new training block in conjunction with staying a little further away from failure, maybe 3 to 4 reps in reserve, for a better runway for progression. But also something you can do is set your rep standards in week 1. So something that I really like to do, especially if it's a new movement, is lay the foundations for that movement in order to progress from in future. So what I like to do here is set my rep standards where in this one you'll notice I get a full stretch at the bottom, I pause for 1 to 2 seconds, and then I squeeze my scapula up, thoracic extension very, very slightly to engage the erectors and the upper back. And that's how my rep standard stays, especially in this week 1, so that all I need to do in the subsequent weeks from here, maintain that technique standard, and I just either progress in either reps or load, or a combination of both. And when I can no longer keep those standards, I have failed, I have reached technical failure, and then I know that I've kind of reached the maximum for that exercise. Maybe I need to deload, maybe I need to sub out the movement, or maybe I just need to change the rep range to vary the stimulus that I'm getting from that exercise. But we'll rip into this. This is just one hard working set, 8 to 12 reps. Oh, that was good. Probably 2 to 3 reps in reserve. A little bit lighter than I would normally go, but it does leave a big runway for progression in weeks to come. So hitting the top end of that rep bracket in week 1 does mean that week 2 I just simply need to increase the load to start that progression, or that timeline for progression. All right, moving on to exercise 3, bilateral lat pull down. 2 working sets here. So again, I've kept this one in. This was progressing really nicely in my last block, so nothing changes, keeping this one in. Just starting a little bit lighter, as I mentioned, in this week. So probably just going like 1 plate lighter than I had maxed out last week in my final overloading week. So sort of, it's like 2 weeks of like, you know, going backwards, so to speak, or maintaining in order to continue progressing in this program. So this week a little bit lighter, next week probably match my hardest performance in my last block, and then aim to progress from there. Again, only looking for very small progressions in either load or reps, so it doesn't need to be great. But we'll kick this one off, 2 working sets here. I'm aiming for the top end of this rep spread, obviously, so I can just add load next week. So we'll get stuck in this one. Easy work, 12 reps. Oh, all right, so that's the back portion of this workout done. We had 4 back exercises, and then we move into some push. So we've got some basically chest for the remainder of this session, with this session being a full upper body session. And I've had a lot of questions this week around like, what's the best training split? I think the best training split is the one that you can stick to consistently for the longest period of time. Now, arguably, training split is less important than all the other variables like volume, frequency, intensity, and is likely just the organization of all of those other variables in a way that makes sense to you and your specific circumstances. So what I mean by that is, based on how much volume you need to do, based on the amount of training frequency you need to do, and how hard you train, because that'll affect your recovery. And all of those factors need to be taken into consideration to basically build the best training split for you to make all those variables work. So training split is less likely a variable you need to worry about, and I think you could get far better results if you're worried about all the other stuff and then organize your training in a way that makes the most sense to you. Because I think a lot of the best gains I've made have been like super random training splits where I've done like chest with hamstrings and back with delts and buys on a chest day and things like that, because it's really just finding out how you can organize your training in a way that doesn't impede performance or recovery, and that you can maximize your progression in the gym. All right, so on to chest. 2 working sets of machine fly. These were making really great progress last block, so again, I haven't changed these out, and I guess what you'll notice is this training block is probably very similar, just with some slight changes to the overall training split, but a lot of the movements have stayed in. And I think that's a point to bring up around exercise selection is you don't always need to do different stuff. I've had exercises sometimes in a program for like up to a year because they've been progressing. I might just change potentially the order I do them in. I might change the rep spread. I might do a top set back off. I might add a rest pause or something like that. But for the most part, you could keep exercises in for a long time if they're progressing and causing no pain. This one being a great exercise again, like I keep saying, with isolation exercises potentially first, especially during dieting phases where fatigue is higher, risk of injury is higher. So maybe we want to like minimize or reduce our exposure to heavy loading. So doing an isolation movement first. The objective is to train your chest. Chest fly is probably arguably the best like chest exercise because it just trains the chest. So why not do that first before we move on to some heavy pressing? Again, limit load exposure, but also maximal stimulus to the pecs. So first set here, 10 to 15 reps. I've gone a little bit lighter than where I finished off previous blocks, so aiming to get 15 here. Should be pretty comfy, about 2 reps in reserve. Beautiful. Yeah, that was nice. All right, chest flies done, 2 working sets, got 15 and 12, a little bit lighter than last overloading week, which is good, room for progression next week. So on to chest press. Now this kind of goes back to my point about exercise selection. My primary chest pressing movement was the prime incline press. It was getting really stale, progression was not happening. I stalled out for a couple of weeks. So typically speaking, I'll give a movement maybe 2 weeks. If I stall out on 1 week, I'll just kind of put it down to maybe like external factors. If it happens 2 weeks in a row, then it's probably time to move out that exercise for something else because there's no more stimulus to be gained from that. So prime presses out, able chest presses in. This one being converging chest press, we do get a little more sort of oomph out at the top. We do get a little more squeeze with that converging press. I've kept in dumbbell press after this, but dumbbell press was typically like my second exercise for chest. It's now my last exercise for chest. Again, removing exposure to those heavy loaded movements, I do only have 1 set there. So it's basically trying to get a lot of like chest isolation done to maximize stimulus to the pecs. And then 1 heavy hard press on the dumbbell incline. Again, gonna get lots of triceps, lots of anterior delts, but it's an opportunity to kind of minimize exposure while still getting good pec stimulus, because the pecs are gonna be going into that exercise pretty fatigued. So you know they're the thing they're gonna fail. Oh, that's going to be fun. Almost a full stack on week 1, 3 to 4 reps in reserve, which is good. Means we're going to get nice load progressions here, which I want on my primary pressing movements. 1 more set there, 1 set on incline dumbbell press, and we are done for upper body day 1 on this new training block. Two sets done. Dumbbell press. Let's go. Alright, so that was 1 set of dumbbell press done. Upper body session, finito. But I guess this is a good point to bring up, especially on that exercise. For example, last block I finished at 55, I think for like sets of 10, so 55 kilo dumbbells. That was 1 set of 12 at 45. So lighter. But I'm doing that as my last exercise now, so like in terms of the relative effort, it's the same because I'm doing it later in the session under more fatigue. So arguably, if I can get back to, let's say 55 kilo dumbbells for 12 reps in the next few weeks, that'll be progression for me, because I think that's a really often overlooked variable with program design is instead of like changing movements or drastically changing your training split or program structure, you could really just change the sequencing of your exercises. So this is something, especially if you're stagnating with a movement, like if you've been doing dumbbell press first in your session for say 6 to 10 reps, you can't progress the load anymore, you're really stagnated. The easiest and simplest thing you could do is literally move it to like your second exercise. Maybe change your rep range, move it to 8 to 12. And again, you just start a whole runway for progression there, because you don't need a lot of exercises. Like realistically, within a session, like 2 to 4 exercises in a session for a muscle group across the week, maybe 3 to 5 different variations. I always say err on the side of caution, do less, because the less exercises you do, I guess the better you get at doing those movements, because you get more practice. There's less like variables that you need to kind of account for with different machines, different movements, different exercises. If you've only got to practice a couple of movements, you get really good at it really quickly. So by simply keeping exercises in the rotation for longer periods of time, maybe adjusting the sequencing or adjusting the rep ranges, you can get lots out of movements for long periods of time. And I think that's where people really make a lot of good progress in the gym, by just doing simple stuff really, really well. Anyway, session 1 in the books, last block of this contest prep meso, upper body ticked off, pretty damn happy. Tomorrow we're back in for legs, which I'm very excited about. Actually, haven't trained legs since like last Tuesday or something, so looking forward to it. It's gonna be a hard one. But as always, guys, really appreciate the support. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, share. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow and reach more people every day. So until tomorrow, guys, peace.